Is this the old one?
Yeah, no, this is the correct one. Let me check this one.
Yes. Otherwise it will mix me up. Oh, yes. I was confused. This is part of that.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Siya Koza. I'm the spokesperson for the Minister of Home Affairs. My role today is to just facilitate the engagement between you and the Minister. Without wasting any further time, I would invite the Minister to come and give us his statement, outlining the kinds of services that the Department of Home Affairs will be offering during Level 2. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Program Director and Spokesperson for the Department of Home Affairs, my colleague, the Deputy Minister of Home Affairs, Njabulun Nzuza, the Home Affairs Acting Director General, Mr. Jackie McKay, who is with us here on the stand, and the Home Affairs Deputy Director General for Civic Services, Mr. Sigama, who's also with us here to help answer some of the technical questions if they may arise, members of the media, fellow citizens. Good morning, and thank you for making time to engage with us as we outline services which are offered by the Department of Home Affairs under Alert Level 2 of the lockdown. These services resumed 2 days ago, that is on the 26th of August, after the directions authorizing the provision of these services was gazetted. Today we are here just to outline, for those who might not understand and also to ask questions, to outline how it is going to be done. The Deputy Minister and myself work very closely with the officials in the department to constantly review the services that can resume safely in line with the disaster regulations and the health protocols in place. Let me start by saying we should remember at all times why we are here where we are as a country, and why certain services were stopped, and why we want to resume them. It might be very obvious to some people, but definitely people may forget. We are here where we are because we wanted to save lives. But now we are balancing it with livelihoods, because in Home Affairs, you know the crowds that come to our offices, because almost every South African at some stage in their life will need Home Affairs offices. So our offices are always overcrowded. And if social distancing is important in COVID-19, you will understand then why certain services could not be provided. But now we are painfully aware that as the economy opens, people having to go on with their lives, they cannot do so without the Department of Home Affairs, because even activities in the economy depend on what Home Affairs can provide. So we are here trying to strike a very delicate balance. So as a way of balancing the need to offer critical enabling documents to citizens, the directions providing for the following additional services were issued, as I said, on Tuesday, the 25th August 2020. Ireke tšee sebaka se go hlatholla ntho ya botse gore batho ba tsebe gore re leka ka matla go boloka maphelo a batho ka gore ka mo kgorong ya rena ya Home Affairs go a tlalwa ka gore a go ne motho mo nageng o e leng gore go tloga a belegwa go fitlhela a tlhokafala a ka se hwetse go le bohlokwa go ya Home Affairs o swanetse go belegwa o nyaka certificate sa matswalo o tla Home Affairs he o gola o tsena mahlalagading o nyaka pasa o tla Home Affairs ge o nyala o nyaka certificate sa lenyalo o tla Home Affairs ge o hlokafetse le gona go ne le wa swantse o tlang Home Affairs o tšea certificate sa gore aowa o tlogile mo lefatsheng le so nako e ka moka mo bophelong jwa gago o nyaka Home Affairs go bula business go nyakega ID o nyaka Home Affairs go etela dinaga tše dingwe go nyakega passport o nyaka Home Affairs so gore bophelo bja bo sepele o nyaka o swanetse gore o etele kgoro ya Home Affairs a ke hlatholle ke boletše gore go o nyala o nyaka Home Affairs batho ba managana gore ge ba hlala ba nyaka Home Affairs re ke be ga botseo nna re hladiše batho ra ba nyalantšha ba hladiša ke kgoro ele ya justice so go hlala o se ka tla mo rena nna re tla mo wena o ratana fela o nyaka o nyala so re bontšha gore bophelo bja go ka moka kgoro e bohlokwa jwanong ka lebaka leo ge re tswaletše di tirelo ka baka la bolwetse jwa COVID re a tseba gore batho ba ya go ba mohlakong ke ka baka le re di bulang ga nnyane but re di bula ka mokgwa e leng gore ga re nyake gore batho ba rena ba no fetela ke bolwetse jo ka baka la meraladi e metelele le batho ba bantšintši ba batlang mo diofising tša rena jwanong di-service tše re di buletšeng ke tše. Number 1, all temporary identity certificates issued during the period of the national state of disaster that have not yet expired on the date of commencement of these directions are hereby extended up to the 31st of October 2020. Le a tseba re be re tswaletše taba ya dipasa re sa fe batho dipasa re be re ba fa ntho e bitswang gore ke TIC ke gore go ne pasa wa itimetša go ba wa se e bone gore e mo kae re go fa ntho e ba ereng ke temporary identity certificate or TIC ka baka la gore dipasa re be di office tša rena di be di sa dumele go fa batho dipasa ka ge be re tšhaba yona merala di emeteleleo re tšhaba yona bolwetse jwa COVID jwalong re wa swereng certificate seo ka gore se tšea kgwedi tše tharo jwanong re nagana gore tše ntšhi tša tsona di expirile wa se swereng a tsebe gore re a se extenda go fihla ka di 31 tša October 2020 se tlabe se sa lokile so anybody who has got a temporary identity document mustn't worry we are extending it up to the 31st of October 2020. Number 2, applications for identity cards or green barcoded identity documents by persons who have been issued with a temporary identity certificate during the national state of disaster, which certificates have expired. Because let me explain it very well because it confused people. The one we are extending up to the 31st of October are certificates that have already expired. We are saying we are extending them up to the 31st of October. Which have not yet expired, sorry. The certificates that have not yet expired, we are extending them. But those who have expired already, we are inviting the people to come into the offices to come and fetch the ID. I'm sure I confused issues. Batho bao ba swereng lengwalo le la nakwana le le emetšeng pasa re le bitšang TIC ba e leng gore lengwalo le la bona le sa le tirong a se la fella ke matla ke gore ga la expire ba le sware ba tšwele pele ka lona go fihlela ka di 31 tša October ka 2020 mara ba e leng gore ba swere lengwalo le mohuto ba expirile ba e mo di ofising tša rena ba e go tšea pasa ko re bulela bona fela go tšea pasa ka gore mangwalo a tshwanetšwe wa re be re ba file a expirile and re bulela ka gore re tseba nomoro ya bona gore ke ba ba kae re tseba nomoro ya mangwalo a expirileng and re kgonne go bona gore ge re ba bolela ba bitša gore ba tle di ofising go ka se go tlalwa ka mokgwa go tshoša go sona le ge re buletše dipasa ka moka so we know the numbers of the documents that have expired. And that's why we are calling them, because we know the offices won't be overwhelmed. Number 3, applications for first issue of identity card or green barcoded identity document. Now, those people who never had an ID before, whether e la e talana goba ya card a senkano ba le pasa, ra ba dumella gore ba tle mo diofising ka gore ba sa tswa matlhalagading ke baswa ka moka kore ke bana ba ka moka ba fitlhela mengwage lesome le tselelang. All the youngsters who are turning 16 who have never had an ID in their life, we are opening for them to come and collect ID. You will appreciate that we are doing so because we also want to help matriculants. Many of them are going to write matric, they've turned 16, and the white ID. So all those are allowed to go to our offices to take the ID. Bana ba tswa matlhalagading ba fitlhela mengwage lesome le metso e selelago ba ile ra sanka ba le pasa mo bophelong ba bona, ra ba dumella gore ba tle diofising tša rena ba tlo tšea pasa. Re tseba ga botse gore bana ba leng mphatong wa marematlou ba ba yang go ngwala moleko ba nyaka wa nyakega gore ba be le dipasa, so re ka se ba thibelele ka gore nyaka ba ngwala moleko le a tse gore bana ba boetse sekolong. Tone a thuto ba biditse gore ba boele dikolong ba tlo ngwala moleko, so re a gapeletša go ba fa dipasa, ba ka ya diofising ba go tšea dipasa tšeo. Applications for amendment of personal particulars. Batho ba ileng gore pasa tša bona di bontšha se seng se ba sa se nyakeng, mo gongwe ba go phošagetše tšatši la matswalo, go ba go phošaletše leina la bona, go ba go phošagetše sefane, ke gore ba ba nyakang go change not go phošagala, ba ileng gore ba nyaka go fetola ka bo bona. O ka no ba o nyaka go fetola leina ile gore a se phošo ya rena leina lo lengwadileng mo, o bo lengwadile la gago mara o nyaka go le fetola, o re botše le leng gore no leina le la ka le a e sa le lona ke nyaka le lengwe ke le ka gore a se re na mo Home Affairs re kgethang maina. Let me explain it very well. Amendment means people who want to change the particulars which they gave us. It's not us who have put those particulars in their ID. It's them who came to give us these particulars. Now they want to change them. That is called amendments. They are allowed to come into the office and make those amendments. Now the other category is people who want to apply for rectification. That means corrections on something that went wrong. Be it your date of birth. We usually meet many people who say, my date of birth in the ID is not reflected correctly. It's a mistake. I need to rectify it. Or who says the spelling of my surname is a mistake. Or, that we call rectification. So these are groups of people. Those who want to amend that which the information which they gave us, and they say they want to change it. That is an amendment. They are allowed to come. But those who say, no, Home Affairs, I didn't give you this information. You made a mistake here. This is not what I gave you. I want you to correct it. That's called rectification. They are also allowed to come in. In the period between 21st March 2020, 27th March 2020, I beg your pardon, and 21st August 2020, the department issued 347,787 temporary ID certificates. Gauteng accounted for most of these temporary identification certificates and has issued 92,597 in this period between the first day of the lockdown on the 27th of March and the 21st of August. Of the total issued temporary identification certificate, 65,129 have expired. They are no longer in use, they have expired. Now we are saying holders of these expired TRCs are now eligible to apply for smart IDs. Those are the ones I mentioned a few moments ago. They must come. We know there are 65,000, so we are expecting 65,129 people to go to our offices and apply for a smart ID card. Now, the validity of the remaining, in other words, then in the hands of citizens, we know that then there are 282,658 temporary identification certificates. Those are the ones who are extending up to the 31st of October because they've not yet expired. So we know our numbers, we know who's going to come and we know who is not going to come. On average, the department processes 1 million first-time applications a year, mostly from learners, for those who apply for IDs. The departments have received a report from the Department of Basic Education indicating that there are 637,767 learners who do not have IDs. Bana bao ba sneng dipasa mara ba leng sekolong ba yang go ngwala matric ke 637,767. Ra balaletša gore ba ka ya mo diofising program eo deputy minister ge ke fetša mo o tle tla bolela ka yona gore e sepediše bang gore ke program e re fileng yena gore a e sepediše mo basweng a bone gore ba ba le dipasa pele ba ngwala matric. On average, 4,000 people a month visit our offices for amendments and rectification of personal particulars. So ke bolela ka ba le ba yang go fetola maina le difane le tšatši la matswalo go ya ka maitemogelo a rena go tla ba dikete tše nne kgwedi ka kgwedi. So when we open, we know that at least in a month there will be 4,000 people who come for rectification or amendment. South Africans who are abroad and need to return to South Africa can apply for emergency passports. Let me explain this. We received complaints, some of them even from members of parliament, about South Africans who are abroad whose passports have expired. And they were asking us to extend them like we are extending TICs or we are extending permits. You remember when the COVID-19 started, we said those people who are in South Africa by permits, we can extend them. Now there is an expectation that we can extend passports. Let me make it very clear. The rules that governs passports are not rules of the Department of Home Affairs, but they are rules of an organization called ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization. ICAO is an international organization. They govern passports, and every country who is a member of ICAO have to follow those rules. According to those rules, a passport is never extended. You cannot extend a passport. If we do, say, as South Africa, put a stamp and say we are extending your passport, we'll do so. Let me tell you, you'll never enter any country. They'll turn you there or they'll even arrest you. They'll never agree. And the simple reason is that the International Civil Aviation Authority is trying to stop fraud, passport fraud, which is so prevalent among international syndicates. So once we issue a passport once, it's issued once, when it expires, it gets thrown away, we'll give you a new passport. That number cannot even be repeated. We cannot give you a passport that holds the number we used to hold before, like an ID. If you apply for an ID, you have got an ID number. If it gets lost, we issue it with a very similar number. We never do so with a passport. If you come to us and tell us your passport has expired, you get a new number. If you say your passport is lost, we block it, we give you a new number. So we cannot extend passport. Then what is the remedy? If you are stuck overseas and you want to come to South Africa, you are given a temporary one-way passport. Whether you are in New York, or you are in London, or you are in Paris, or you are in Lagos, or you are in Nairobi, or you are in Harare, or Lusaka, you want to come back home, they will give you a temporary passport. That is one way. In other words, it's just to allow you to get into that plane at that moment and arrive home and enter South Africa. From there, we'll see what to do. So I want this issue to be understood very clearly. We cannot, as some people have asked, extend a passport through a stamp or whoever. Passports are never extended. Passports We never issue the same number again. That's exactly the rules of the International Civil Aviation Authority. The department, in partnership with the banks, which participate in the online system of smart ID card and passport applications, have opened for collections for clients who had applied for these documents before the lockdown. This service will only be provided on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays during the bank's operating hours. I think I need to explain this. During my budget speech last year, I announced that we have got an arrangement with the banks for people to apply for an ID or a passport online using their bank. You sit at home online, you apply, then the bank calls you to come and do biometrics in the bank, and from there they collect everything, they give it to Home Affairs, we do a background check, and we send it to government printers to print your passport and your ID. That is the job we've been having with the banks. Now, when the lockdown started, some of the banks closed this service, and some people have already applied. Now, we are saying certain banks have opened just for people to come and collect, not to start from the beginning, to come and collect the applications they already submitted before COVID-19. And those banks say they will open for that collection on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, only during working hours. So if you know yourself to have applied for an ID or a passport through the bank, and it was never issued to you because of the closure and the lockdown, you can now go to that particular bank where you applied and collect it, but go on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. People who had applied for these documents before the 26th of March 2020, which is in the lockdown starting date, may collect their smart ID cards and or passports from their selected bank branches. Bank branches that will be reopening for collection of smart IDs and passports are the following. So, asi di banka ka moka, tse di yang go bula, go fa batho di pasa tseo le di ID tse ba tsema di apply la asi di banka ka moka. So it's not all the banks. I think it will be important to help people by reading the names of the banks that will be open and saving people on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Friday to collect their IDs. It is the Absa Green Acres in Port Elizabeth, Absa Sandton City, Absa Towers in Johannesburg, Absa Lifestyle Centurion, FNB Lifestyle Centurion, FNB Menlyn Pretoria, FNB Merchant Sandton, FNB Portside Cape Town, Investec Bank Sandton, Nedbank Arcadia, Nedbank Constantia Kloof in Roodepoort, Nedbank Rivonia, Nedbank Nelspruit, Nedbank St. George's Mall, Cape Town, Standard Bank Simon Street in Johannesburg, Standard Bank Canal Walk in Cape Town, Standard Bank Killarney Mall in Johannesburg, Standard Bank Centurion Lifestyle, Standard Bank Kingsmead in Durban, and Standard Bank Jubilee Mall in Hammanskraal. Those banks on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays are prepared to be open, but during working hours to issue the IDs that you will have applied for before the lockdown. The e-Home Affairs portal remain deactivated as new applications are still not accepted in the current level of the lockdown. There are some media houses who ask us about e-Home Affairs portal. The e-Home Affairs portal is where people apply at home online and then make an appointment to come to the Department of Home Affairs and do their biometrics. This is the very same job that was done with the banks. We will never be able to offer it in ordinary Home Affairs offices because our people don't understand the system of making appointments. They all come at the same time. They don't follow appointments. So in the banks, they were able to follow these appointments. That's why they were doing the e-Home Affairs. Now, that system remained closed The people who are going there to collect IDs are those who applied for those IDs before the system was closed. So it remained closed. You cannot go and start applying from the beginning. The refugee reception offices and the borders throughout the country remain closed. We are not opening any border. We're not opening any refugee reception office. The VFS offices are open only by appointment for collection of outcomes on applications which were made before the lockdown. People remember that VFS is the visa facilitation services. They are aware that that has been closed. Now we are saying it will only be open by appointment for collection of outcomes on applications which were made before the lockdown. During each lockdown level, we analyze the numbers of people who normally visit our offices and determine which services we can offer safely. At all times, we aim to protect the lives of our employees and citizens while ensuring access to essential services. In reality, the pandemic is still with us, and we want to keep the numbers of people who could be exposed to the virus in our offices to a bare minimum. That's why we are doing things in the way I've just announced. Even when the world paused during the level 5 of the lockdown, Home Affairs didn't. We couldn't. Our people needed our services to adjust to a new normal. We kept going within the limitations caused by COVID-19 regulations. Since the beginning of the lockdown until the 25th of August, our committed and dedicated staff assisted more than 1.6 million people who visited our offices with crucial enabling documents. So it means even during the lockdown, when we have markedly reduced the services we could offer, still 1.6 million people visited our Home Affairs offices. And we assisted them with the following services. We issued, or rather we reissued. That means people who wanted replacement birth certificate, we reissued 181,492. Not new birth certificate, but for those who wanted replacements because something happened with their birth certificate. We issued 198,846 death registrations during that period. We issued 347,787 temporary ID certificates, as I've already indicated earlier. We registered 366,988 births. That means people who were born and taking a birth certificate for the first time were 366,988 during this period. We also issued 318,812 IDs and 195,474 passports, mostly for people involved with essential services. Somebody may ask and said, no, but Minister, you said passports application is closed, is still closed now. So how did you issue 195,474? You'll remember that there are people who were allowed to cross the borders. Those who were transporting cargo across our borders, we have never closed that. The truck drivers, many of them came to take passports from us. People who are involved in essential services like health services, they were also allowed to go through our borders. People who were manning certain essential economic sectors. So for those, we've issued 195,474 passports. From the beginning of the lockdown on 27 March 2020 until Wednesday, 26 August 2020, our immigration officials assisted 839,004 people to cross our borders under the permissible conditions. You'll remember that even though our borders were closed, there were people who were applying because of certain conditions that forced them to cross the borders. I've already mentioned them. For instance, the the truck drivers, the people who are coming for health services. We are now opening for students in neighboring countries who study in South Africa. But since the 27th of March to the 26th of August, 839,004 people crossed our borders, and they were assisted by our officials under permissible conditions that were permissible under the lockdown. Most of these people were foreign nationals who were returning to their countries, and South Africans who were returning home. We could not stop people from going home, and we could not stop South Africans from coming back here. So certain groups have to be allowed. Some of these South Africans have since returned to their base countries. Other people who were assisted include those who were traveling for emergency medical evacuations. I've already said that. As we resume more services, I urge everyone who will be visiting our offices and our partner banks to observe health protocols, please, aimed at combating the spread of COVID-19. They must wear face masks, maintain social distancing, and adhere to all other applicable regulations. The banks had undertaken to continue doing all in their powers to protect their staff and clients. It's very important, fellow South Africans, for us to protect the public and our clients, because if we don't do so, it can be counterproductive. Quite a number of Home Affairs offices which were open had to close when somebody tests positive in there, and there won't be any services. We had to close them, send everybody home, sanitize them, test them. So when a person in a Home Affairs tests positive, it is not in the interest of citizens. That's why we are urging them to wear masks and not get angry when they turn you away from a Home Affairs office and say you don't have a mask, because we don't allow anybody to enter our office without a mask. We also insist on social distancing, and we want people to use sanitizers. So we are doing it for the smooth running of our offices and to protect you. Because if we don't, we might end up closing that office because somebody tested positive, and people in that area suffer. I know quite a number of offices had to be closed in the Eastern Cape, and we had lots and lots of complaints from the public, from even the Premier of the Eastern Cape complaining because people found offices closed. And so if people don't cooperate, offices will be closed because somebody tested positive, and we'll send them home. So re khopela batho ba rena gore please ba kwishishe gore re leka go dirang. Ge re ba ganetša go tsena ka ofising ya Home Affairs ka baka la gore ga ba rwala mask, go ba ga ba maintain social distancing ya go se batamelane, go ba gana di-sanitizers re ba gomiša, re thuša bona ka gore ge re ka se dire ka mokgo o mongwe ka mogare ga office ya Home Affairs a testa positive for COVID, office eo re a e tswalela, re o fetša matšatši a mane or even beke re e kwaletše re sanitizer. Batho ba tlo safara mo felong la boito. So ge le senya go safara berekang le rena gore re kgone go tšwela pele, re kgone go lefa ditirelo. Thank you very much. Ke a leboga. I think the Deputy Minister will come and deliver his services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minister, Director General, and members of the media. As the Minister has indicated that I'm delegated to deal with the issue of ID, campaign for learners, as well as birth registration and the collection of identity documents backlog. And as such, when lockdown started, we had to look at ways of making sure that learners receive their identity documents in a safe manner, and also to deal with the backlog that will have arisen as a result of the lockdown. So we partnered with the Department of Basic Education in June 2020, and started a special program focused specifically on learners to assist them to get their identity documents. I'm pleased to announce that in the 10 weeks of the start of the program, we have managed to register 62,104 IDs that have been issued to learners, and this program will continue ahead. There are other learners who applied for their identity documents between January and March, which means the 10-week period is for that particular period that is under lockdown. So there are others that will have applied between January and to March. This year has indeed been a very unusual year. It is important that learners spend as much time in schools rather than anywhere else, because you will know that the fact that there was COVID-19 that disturbed the academic program. Now we can no longer afford to have more learners going to our offices queuing during school hours. And as such, that is why we then devised this program to make sure that we go to learners, siye kubona lapha abakhona sikwazi ukubasiza labakhona ezikoleni. So we will then continue with this program, working with the Department of Education. We are having a two-way project. Okusho ukuthi lo msebenzi usebenza ngendlela ezimbili. Indlela yokuqala esusebenza ngayo ukuthi siya kuma learners using ama mobile units ethu. Indlela yesibili esisebenza ngayo ukuthi during ama weekends, ama Saturday, siba nama volunteer program with youth yakwa Home Affairs efikayo izo volunteer for a Saturday to make sure that on that Saturday specifically sisevisa ama learners. Siyake contact u Department of Education kuyo leyo circuit esuke khona, then bese bekwazi ukuthi basilethela ama learners. So we work this program in a two-way, one using mobile unit, two by opening special weekends and Saturdays to make sure that learners come through. As the minister has indicated that we have registered 366,988 beds during the backlog, and also dealing with the backlog, because when the first weeks of lockdown we could not register beds, and as such that created a backlog. So the 366,988 is inclusive of the backlog. This also we work through it by making sure that we open our registration facilities as Home Affairs in bed registration centers. So now we encourage all mothers and parents who are giving birth to make sure that they register their children within 30 days, which is a program that we call early birth registration. And to do that really helps us in the long term, because it means if you register a child in a birth facility where they are born, they walk out of the hospital or that birth facility already having a birth certificate, which makes impilo yalo mntwana to be easy for the rest of their life, and they don't have to undergo late birth registration, which requires a lot of documents. So we really encourage parents to make sure that they register the birth of their children within 30 days. Now, lastly, we still have more than 300,000 identity documents that are sitting with Home Affairs throughout the country. Those are identity documents that have not been collected by the applicants who came to our offices to apply for our identity documents up. We urge all those that know that they applied for identity documents and they received messages that their identity documents are ready to come through to our offices to collect their identity documents so that they can use them for their own benefit. That is very important that they collect their identity document. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister and Deputy Minister. We are now arrived at the opportunity where we're gonna allow people to send us questions. I've got colleagues who are assisting me here. I would like to first check if we've got anyone on the line.
Thanks, Chairperson. We don't have questions on the telephone lines.
Okay, thanks very much, Jabu. Ishmael, can you help us with the questions from the WhatsApp line?
Thank you, sir. It's Java. I have two questions. One from Christian Duplessis from Network 24. She's asking, should South Africans working and living overseas whose passports expire come back to South Africa to apply for a new passport, or what is the process? What special arrangements are made? And I have a question from Nazir from Glow TV. Do you have an estimate as to how many illegal foreigners are in the country? Which is the most common method that illegal foreigners are coming into our country, and how are you curbing it, especially now with the risk of spreading COVID-19? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Jabu. Minister, I would like to invite you, because those are the two questions we have at the moment. I'd like to invite you back to the stage.
Thank you very much. The issue of passport overseas is a little bit complex. People don't have to come back to South Africa to apply for a passport when they're overseas. The issue here was delay. When you apply for a passport in South Africa, our standard is that we can issue it between 5 and 13 days, and we've been able to do so, to give people their passport 5 to 13 days after applying. But that happens only when you are inside the country. When you are outside, you still apply there, but it takes time. Sometimes it takes months, because we depend on the diplomatic push of DERCO, which we are not in control of. Those applications still come manually via the diplomatic push, then it comes here and it gets assessed and all that, and takes a lot of time. That's why many people who were overseas before the lockdown prefer to come home, apply for a passport, and within a week or so, they've got it and they go back. But you are not really forced to come to South Africa to apply for a passport. Now, at the moment, one of the problems that they are experiencing is that embassies are closed. We in Home Affairs, our officials overseas depend on, we don't have individual Home Affairs offices. All the Home Affairs offices overseas are in our diplomatic missions. And as you know, diplomatic missions are owned by DERCO, not Home Affairs. If a DERCO office is closed, then Home Affairs officials cannot work. But we know instances where people have phoned, because in all the closed DERCO offices, they put a number there for emergencies and say, please phone me, I'm working from home in this mission. People then can phone that person and go to be helped. And now, I have just mentioned earlier on that those who need to come home as an emergency and they need a passport, they will be given an emergency passport, but which is just one way to come home. So you don't really have to come home unless, to apply for a passport, unless you are forced by this circumstance I've mentioned. Now, the question of how many illegals are in South Africa. All the figures of people who are in South Africa illegally is through research, investigation, and sheer guesswork, or let me say estimate. Let me put a better scientific way to it. It is through estimate. Because we cannot know the number of people who come illegally, because they did exactly that. They came illegally without anybody knowing. And many of them don't want to be seen. I've had people trying to challenge us on this issue. Why don't we know? We know the number of people who came to South Africa illegally but went to the Refugee Reception Center and registered as an asylum seeker. Even if they came illegally, they entered the country illegally, but they come in and say, look, I'm coming to apply for refugee status and I'm an asylum seeker. Those ones we know, because then we give them a Section 22 notice to say be in the country for a period of 3 to 6 months while you are applying. When their application fails, they get deported back home. But that number we know. But illegals we don't know, for the simple reason that many of them don't want to be known, because they came illegally for whatever reason. They don't want to be identified. They don't even want to apply because maybe they believe they are going to fail. So anybody who comes with this figure is out of research. We do have some research organizations who do that, out of estimates, and we really don't have that number. Thank you very much. And part of closing our borders was to try and solve this problem. But remember, the borders which we closed the border gates, not the border itself. Even where there's a fence, you have seen people skipping through the fences and coming to South Africa. So they cross through the borderline, not through the border gates, because the border gates are closed and there's no way to go through there. So when you go through a borderline, you definitely don't want anybody to know about it, because you know you acted illegally. You acted outside the law. Thank you very much.
Thank you once again, Minister. This would be the last round of questions. I would like to check with Ishmael if you've got anyone on the line.
No questions on the line, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jabu, do you have anyone on the SMS line?
Thank you, Chair. I have Alex Mishley from News 24. Is there any financial help being offered to South Africans abroad that need to return home? The prices of repair flats are exorbitant. During the lockdown, has the department continued with deportation of illegal foreigners? If so, how many people were deported throughout the lockdown? And I have a follow-up question from Christian Du Plessis from Network 24. Can the minister please elaborate on the progress made in establishing the Border Management Authority? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much, Jabu. I also have received a question from a colleague at German TV. His name is Mfanasibi Ngosi. His question is, just trying to get to it now. He's asking whether foreigners working in South Africa can apply to extend their work permits, which are due to expire, and will they be allowed to come back into the country on inbound repatriation flights? Thank you very much. Sorry. My apologies. Can I also take a question from the colleagues here? Stelman?
Sipho Stelman from SABC TV News. I want to get clarity on this closure of your offices on the basis of a staffer testing positive. So if one staffer that tests positive, whether they work in management, they are not in the front lines, you simply close the office. And for how long will you close the offices, especially considering that you're talking about the issues of your backlogs and that there's about 300,000 IDs that need to be fetched. So what is the duration of your closure when you find a staffer that tests positive, and does it just have to be one and then you simply shut down? And is that the best approach in terms of making sure that you offer services? And just maybe to assist our viewers as well, you've released a number of statistics about what's available, what's not available. So if you can just simplify for us, now that you're on level 2, what is not permitted that you normally, your major services that you normally provide? What is still affected on level 2 that a person cannot go for at the Home Affairs? If you can just give us a bulletin points that during level 2, this you cannot do right now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Sipho. Yes, Minister.
Thank you very much. The issue of helping South Africans who want to come home financially definitely has not happened. There's no amount of resources that we could be able to give South Africans who are abroad to come back home. You may remember that right throughout this period of lockdown, the only people who were helped to come home were those who were at the then center of the storm in Wuhan. They were repatriated at the cost of the state. From there, the others, when they were repatriation, they could be repatriated if there's a flight. You know, countries used to, especially countries in Europe, used to send planes here to fetch their nationals and take them back home. When they hire a SAC flight, we then said those South Africans who are there can come back in that flight. But we don't offer them any financial help whatsoever. It has not been possible, and we have never promised it. The question about how many people were deported through the lockout is a bit tricky because I was not really prepared for that in terms of the actual figures. I don't know whether the acting DG can get them, but what I can tell you, you may remember that there was a problem at Lindela Repatriation Center sometimes in April, where there was it April, DG, where there was an escape and sort of an uprising, people demanding to go back home. At that time, on the 26th of May, we repatriated through the borders 538 Zimbabwean nationals. We also deported 472 Malawian nationals and 300 Malawian nationals, and before that we had repatriated 94 Lesotho nationals, and then we deported 515 Mozambican nationals. All this happened during the lockdown at Lindela. But you are also aware that correctional services also releases people who come from other countries who have served sentences. There are people who have stayed in jail in South Africa for 3 months, some up to 20 years. When they finish serving, if it was a criminal offense, we don't allow them to stay here. The correctional services send the list to us, we sign it out, and then they get deported. So that also has been happening, because in terms of the law, you can't keep a person at Lindela Repatriation Center for more than 120 days. So because we are trying to avoid that, we had to repatriate people. The issue of work permits, I'm sure you are aware, we set all form of permits and visas, not only work permits, any type of visa. When the lockdown started, we said we are extending it up to the 31st of July. You don't have to worry about it. When the 31st of July arrived, we extended it to the 31st of October, and we are still inside that period. So whether it's a work permit or a visitor's visa or business visa, etc., they are all extended up to the 31st of October. You don't have to worry about that. People who want to come back home to South Africa, even through this period, yes, we have got quite a number of people who apply. There's a special team of the department in net joins, Home Affairs, Terco, Transport. They sit together and look at those applications, and they allow you a special permit to come back. Now, the question from Mr. Sterman, if I'm not mistaken, is about staffer who test positive. Yes, our unions were very militant on this issue. They clearly demanded that we cannot expose their members to the trouble of COVID-19. When there's somebody positive, they demanded that the office be closed so that all the other workers get protected, but it also protects our clients who visit the office. So we close it immediately and then test people there, and then it has to be deep cleansed, and it would take anything between 4 days and a week for that to happen. Unfortunately, that's what we do. If we don't do that, unions accuse us that we don't care about the lives of their members. We want to expose them to COVID-19, and they get very militant about it. In fact, some of the offices were closed by them even before we were there. forcefully, especially in the Western Cape. That happened a lot. So we agreed with them that, of course, because we never know about this COVID-19, we won't forgive ourselves if somebody passes away because of our offices, because then they are going to say we are reckless with human life. So we do close them, yes. And we think it's the best approach because we are dealing with life here. Now the question is, what is that which we are not offering yet under level 2? We are not offering the biggest offer we have got under level 2. People who come to apply for IDs which were lost. That means, as you heard the Deputy Minister, we're only issuing IDs for new entrants. Any other person, we are not yet issuing them IDs. That's why we said we are issuing them only those who had TICs which expired, and we know the number is only 65,000 people. So that we are not yet doing. As you know, we are not yet issuing passports except for a specific group of people which I've mentioned earlier. The truck drivers, people doing essential services, people who are forced to leave the country for emergency reasons, etc., etc. But otherwise, we are not issuing passport generally. We are also not opening our borders. Whatever functions is happening at the borders, we're not giving that service. We are not also giving services at our refugee reception centers. You'll remember, South Africa has got 5 refugee reception centers where people come and apply for asylum, for refugee status. They remain closed. We have got the refugee reception center in Musina. We have got one here in Marabastad, the biggest of them all, the Desmond Tutu Refugee Reception Center. We've got one in Cape Town. We've got one in Nelson Mandela Bay, and we've got one in eThekwini. They remain closed. We're not offering any services there whatsoever. Thank you very much.
Thank you once again, Minister. I just wanted to double check with my colleagues if we have any other questions on the line.
No questions on the line?
Okay, thank you very much. Minister, we have just one question. It is from Rapelang Khatebe of the SABC. He wants to know if there is consideration for the partial reopening of the borders with countries which are our neighbors, like Lesotho and Swaziland, primarily because of their proximity and their uniqueness. The uniqueness of the relationship with South Africa. Thank you.
See, I have one question.
Okay.
From Sophie Mukwena.
Sophie, okay.
Yes, ABC. She's asking, with Zimbabwe currently in the news, have you experienced new trends in terms of people using border lines to cross and end up visiting your office in South Africa? Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Minister, I would like to invite you. This would be the final round of questions. Thank you.
Yes, the question here is the partial opening of borders. I'm not very sure whether I understand exactly what is meant by partial opening of the borders. But maybe let me try my best to explain it this way. South Africa, as you know, has got 72 ports of entries. The gates through which people enter South Africa are 72. 53 of them are land ports of entry, where people come through the land. 11 of them are airports, international airports. 8 of them are seaports. When the lock level started, out of the 53 land ports of entry, we closed 35 of them completely, which means there were still 18 that were remaining open. The other 35 were closed down completely. No activity was taking place there. And we chose them very carefully. We chose them very carefully because there are 6 or up to 7 government entities that are operating at our borders. You have got Home Affairs that issue license passports. You have got SARS for customs. You have got the Department of Health for health issues. We have got Department of Agriculture, which allows what agricultural product is acceptable through our borders or not. We've got Environment. We've got South African Police Service. Now, in the 35 ports of entry, which we closed, there were only 2 government entities. It was police, South African Police Service, SABS, and Home Affairs only. There was no other activity taking place there. That's why we felt it's safe to close them, because it don't affect people very much. It was just a movement of people, a few groups of people per day. We closed them all together. The 18 that were open specifically for business. And our uniqueness with our neighbors is because of business. Trucks were going through to provide essential services and deliver cargo that is essential, to deliver essential medicines. That has never closed right throughout the lockdown. So that is the partial service we were given. They were not just open for ordinary movement of people, but they were open for goods and services and essential services. Now, the 11 airports, as you know, were closed. And then later on, we opened the big ones like OR Tambo, etc., for specific groups of people and for repatriation. And the seaports we closed together, 2 of them in the Western Cape. And then we eventually started using them half later. So the borders still remain closed in the way they were when the lockdown started in March this year. Now, the uniqueness of Lesotho and Eswatini. On Wednesday, the Minister of DERCO, Dr. Naledi Pandor, led a delegation in which I was part of, the delegation of the Minister of DERCO, the Minister of Defense, the Minister of State Security, and the Minister of Home Affairs, where we met the Deputy Prime Minister of Lesotho with his delegations of ministers. If I'm not mistaken, in the delegation, there was Home Affairs, there was Health, there was the Defense Force, there was State Security. We all met about this issue because they were asking us to open the borders between us and Lesotho. But we agreed eventually that we'll put teams on both sides to tell us which service, because they were saying, for instance, there are learners who learn in South Africa every day, who cross the border, especially the Maseru border post, 2 times a day when they go to school in South Africa and go back into Maseru. I saw that myself because I went there. Long before COVID, I visited the Maseru border post. I saw that the Department of Home Affairs has opened a special lane. If you go to Maseru border post, you'll find the green lane there. That lane is for learners. They don't have to queue and produce a passport like all the others. They've got a special permit, which is just stamped, and they go past. In the evening, when they come back, they produce the permit, and they go. They don't queue like the others on the normal customs and all that. That is what we have done for learners in Maseru, because there are many of them. So we said, instead of just saying open the borders, because look, you are mentioning the uniqueness of our relationship with Lesotho and Eswatini. But I can assure you, nobody has got any unique relationship with COVID-19. It doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care about your relationships. So the relationships we have got with other countries, COVID-19 will never respect those relationships. So we must see how we work within the issue of COVID-19 to work with each other. And so we put up a team and said the team led by the Director General here and somebody in Lesotho will come to report us later. And we agreed that myself and the Minister of Home Affairs in Lesotho will soon call a meeting virtually to discuss some of these problems, how they need to be solved. Because if you just say open all, I'm sure we could do so, and we may regret it. And even Lesotho itself, we told them, at the moment in Southern Africa and SADC, the country that is affected the most is South Africa. And it's not inconceivable that if we do so, Lesotho itself will be so heavily infected from people from South Africa in a way that is unimaginable. So we must understand and know all those things. And that's why we have got to sit and work with them. We have already had a virtual meeting with the Minister of Home Affairs and his team in Mozambique, discussing some of the problems at the borders and how we resolve them, rather than just saying we'll open all together. Mesofi Mukwena, about Zimbabwe, I'm not sure, Mesofi, whether I understood you very well when you say have we encountered the situation where Zimbabweans open and come into our offices. I'm not sure whether you are talking about our immigration offices, the refugee reception centers. Remember, those ones are closed altogether, so nobody can go there. We are aware, it has been shown a lot on TV, and it has caught a lot of reactions that Zimbabweans have been crossing the border to come to South Africa, some saying they are here to buy food because the shelves over that side are empty. There was even this fence in Bait Bridge, which has caused ructions in Parliament, where you saw people cutting the fence and going through and all that. We are aware of all those, but as to servicing them officially in our offices, immigration offices, that means the refugee reception centers, they remain closed, and so we cannot encounter anybody because there's nobody there. There are no officials there. All our gates are closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you very much, Deputy Minister and Acting DG. That, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of this broadcast. I would also like to thank all of the colleagues who have helped us to broadcast and carry these messages live to the citizens. And of course, my colleague, Silo, for assisting. Thank you very much. That's the end of today's briefing. Thank you.
Okay, we're wrapping up that crossing to the Minister of Home Affairs.